Imagine standing in the desert, the sun searing the back of your neck. Before you is not a building, but a mountain. A perfect man-made mountain of stone that has defied the elements, the empires, and the relentless scrutiny of humanity for 4.5 millennia. It is the Great Pyramid of Giza, the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. But to call it a wonder is to domesticate it. It is an anomaly, an impossibility, a silent, geometric God that stares back at you, its very existence a question that cuts to the core of everything we think we know about our own past. The structure is aligned to the cardinal points of the compass, with a precision that modern architects would envy, off by a mere fraction of a single degree. Its base, covering 13 acres, is level to within the width of a human thumb. It is composed of 2.3 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as a freight locomotive, fitted together so perfectly that you cannot slip a razor blade between them. This isn't a tomb. It's a statement of terrifying capability. What force, what forgotten science could align a 6 million-ton structure to the planet's poles so accurately? How did a civilization, supposedly armed with nothing more than copper chisels and stone hammers, quarry, transport, and assemble a monument that we, with all our technological might, would be hard-pressed to replicate today? And what if the standard narrative, the one of slaves and ramps and pharaonic ego, is not just incomplete, but a comforting lie we tell ourselves to mask a much more disturbing truth? The answer is not buried in the sand, but encoded in the stone itself. A story of precision and power so profound that it forces us to reconsider the very timeline of human genius. To understand this impossibility, we must first understand the man who first measured it, not as a monument, but as a machine. His name was Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, and in 1880 he arrived in Egypt not as a treasure hunter, but as a metrologist, a scientist of measurement. He was a gaunt, fiercely intelligent Englishman, driven by an almost fanatical obsession with precision. While his contemporaries were blasting their way into tombs with dynamite, searching for gold and glory, Petrie arrived with custom-built theodolites, micrometers, and a burning desire for data. He saw the Giza Plateau not as a graveyard of kings, but as a crime scene, and the Great Pyramid was the central piece of evidence. He chose to live in a nearby tomb, shunning the comforts of Cairo to be closer to his work. For months, he subjected the pyramid to the most rigorous survey ever conducted. He worked at night when the cool desert air would cause his instruments to stabilize, allowing for the most accurate readings. He crawled through suffocatingly narrow passages, his candle casting flickering shadows on walls that had not seen light for millennia. He measured every angle, every length, every stone he could access, filling notebooks with thousands of meticulously recorded data points. His seminal 1883 work, The Pyramids and Temples of Gizeh, was not a book of adventure, but a stark, almost brutal collection of facts and figures. And within those numbers lay a terrifying revelation. The precision he discovered was not random, it was systematic. The tolerances were too fine, the alignments too perfect to be the work of a primitive society. Petrie, a man of science and reason, found himself confronting a level of engineering that his own era, the height of the Industrial Revolution, could not explain. He wasn't just measuring a building, he was measuring the ghost of a forgotten science. The personal stake for Petrie was not his life, but his understanding of the world. He had dedicated himself to the altar of empirical evidence, and that evidence was telling him something deeply unsettling. The architects of the Great Pyramid knew things they shouldn't have known. Petrie's investigation did not happen in a vacuum. It was a direct rebellion against the prevailing atmosphere of 19th century Egyptology, which was less a science and more a state-sanctioned treasure hunt. For centuries, the Great Pyramid had been the subject of wild speculation. Medieval Arabs believed it was a repository of pre-flood knowledge, built by a mythical king to preserve science from the wrath of God. Renaissance scholars saw it as a giant granary built by the biblical Joseph, and by the 1800s it was simply the ultimate prize. Explorers like Giovanni Belzoni, a former circus strongman, used battering rams and brute force to punch their way into chambers, while others, like Howard Weiss, employed gunpowder to blast open new passages, causing irreparable damage in his obsessive quest to find an unlooted tomb. The dominant belief was that the pyramid was a product of limitless manpower and pharaonic cruelty. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing 2,000 years after its construction, passed down the story of 100,000 slaves toiling for decades under the lash of the whip. This narrative was simple, satisfying, and deeply ingrained in the Western imagination. It painted a picture of a tyrannical king sacrificing his people to build a monument to his own ego. This was the intellectual swamp Petrie waded into. The seeds of doubt, however, were already there for anyone willing to look. The sheer quality of the workmanship contradicted the slave labor theory. Slaves, whipped into submission, do not produce joinery so fine that it is invisible to the naked eye. They do not quarry and transport 80-ton granite beams with the care needed to place them flawlessly, hundreds of feet in the air. The escalating fear for a rationalist like Petrie was not of ancient curses, but of a monumental gap in human history. The more he measured, the more the conventional explanation crumbled. If not slaves, then who? And if not primitive tools, then what? The chasm between what was believed and what the evidence showed was growing with every measurement he took. The pyramid was not a monument to a king's power, but to a society's knowledge, and that knowledge was nowhere to be found in the accepted historical record. Our own journalistic investigation begins where Petrie's left off, armed with a century of new data and technology he could only have dreamed of. The evidence against the standard narrative is not circumstantial. It is overwhelming, and it is carved in stone. Let us examine the case file. Exhibit A, the planetary alignment. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north with an accuracy of within 3/60th of a degree. This is a level of precision that was not matched again until the 17th century with the invention of the telescope. As aerospace engineer Glenn Dash noted in a 2017 paper for the Journal of Ancient Egyptian Architecture, this feat is extraordinary. The most plausible method proposed, the fall equinox method, requires a perfect understanding of solar and celestial mechanics, a perfectly level horizon, and days of flawless observation. To execute this on the scale of a 13-acre construction site suggests not just knowledge, but a mastery of applying astronomical data to terrestrial engineering that is simply staggering for the Bronze Age. The structure is not just on the planet, it is locked to the planet. Exhibit B, the casing stones. Originally, the pyramid was covered in approximately 144,000 polished Chura limestone casing stones. They were angled and fitted so perfectly that the pyramid would have appeared as a single, seamless, brilliant white structure, reflecting the sun like a gigantic mirror. According to Petrie's own measurements, the joints between these multi-ton blocks were consistently about 1/50th of an inch. Modern stonemasons have stated on record that achieving this level of precision on such a scale today would be a monumental challenge, even with laser-guided saws. Furthermore, the mortar used is of a chemical composition that has never been replicated. Analysis by the Geopolymer Institute reveals it is a form of gypsum concrete, but its specific chemical makeup remains unknown. It bonds the stones so effectively that it is often stronger than the stone itself. Trying to separate the blocks often results in the stone fracturing, before the mortar gives way? How did they create a chemical binder superior to the parent rock? The question remains unanswered. Exhibit C, the internal granite work. The deepest mysteries lie within. The King's Chamber is built entirely from massive blocks of Aswan granite, quarried from over 500 miles to the south. The 9 stone slabs forming the chamber's ceiling weigh a combined total of over 400 tons. Lifting 50-ton blocks 200 feet into the air and placing them with millimeter accuracy is a problem that challenges modern heavy crane operators. Inside this chamber sits the coffer, famously carved from a single solid block of granite. Its internal corners are perfectly square and drilled out with a precision that suggests advanced machinery. Petrie himself discovered evidence of what he called tube drills. He found drill cores that showed the drill bit was advancing through solid granite at a rate that, by his calculation, would require a downward force of over 2 tons. As engineer and master craftsman Christopher Dunn argues in his book The Giza Power Plant, the spiral grooves on these cores indicate a feed rate so rapid it would be impossible to achieve with simple hand-powered abrasion. The evidence points to a high-speed powered drilling technology that simply should not exist in 2500 BC. Exhibit D, the 8-sided anomaly. For centuries, no one noticed a feature of the pyramid so subtle yet so profound it defies accidental origin. The Great Pyramid is not 4-sided, it is 8-sided. Each of the 4 main faces is slightly concave, indented along its center line by about 1 degree. This concavity is invisible from the ground and can only be detected from the air, and only at dawn and dusk on the spring and autumn equinoxes, when the sun casts a shadow that splits each face in 2. This was first photographed by a British Air Force pilot, P. Groves, in 1940. The precision required to execute this feature across faces over 750 feet long is mind-boggling. Why do it? Why create a feature of such stunning geometric subtlety that it is only visible for a few moments, twice a year, and only from a perspective no ancient Egyptian could have had? It is a feature without a clear purpose, a testament to a design imperative that we do not understand. It is engineering for engineering's sake, or for a purpose so esoteric it is lost to us entirely. Exhibit E, the hidden voids. For all our exploration, the pyramid still holds its secrets. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, a team of international scientists, used a technique called muon tomography to peer inside the pyramid without drilling a single hole, by tracking the path of subatomic particles called muons. As they rained down from the atmosphere, they could detect density variations within the structure. Their findings, published in the journal Nature, were revolutionary. They discovered a massive, previously unknown void, at least 100 feet long, located directly above the Grand Gallery. Dubbed the Scan Pyramid's Big Void, its function is a complete mystery. It is the first major structural discovery inside the pyramid since the 19th century. This discovery is a profound lesson in humility. It proves that after 4,500 years of study, after all the dynamite, the cameras, and the theories, we still do not even have a complete blueprint of the structure. It is a black box, and we have only just realized the box is bigger than we thought. Taken together, this evidence does not just challenge the conventional narrative, it shatters it. It points to a civilization with a deep, functional, and masterful understanding of astronomy, geodesy, chemistry, and physics. The problem is not that we don't have answers, it's that the answers pointed to by the evidence are deeply uncomfortable, because they don't fit our story of the past. The revelation is not a single dramatic discovery, not a hidden papyrus explaining the construction. Instead, the climax of this investigation is a slow, dawning, chilling realization. The shocking truth is that the Great Pyramid is not merely a product of a lost technology, but a monument to a lost consciousness. The defining discovery is the convergence of all these impossibilities. It is not one anomaly we must explain, but a dozen, all interconnected, all pointing in the same direction. The precision is not an accident. The alignment is not a coincidence. The mathematics are not a fluke. The structure is a message, and that message is, we were not who you think we were. The shift in perspective is profound. We are forced to move beyond the simple question of, how did they build it? And ask the far more difficult question, why did they build it this way? Why the obsessive precision? Why encode fundamental mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio into its dimensions, as so many researchers have demonstrated? Why align it to the stars with such fanaticism? The answer is that the Great Pyramid was not just a tomb. To call it a tomb is like calling a supercomputer a calculator. It reduces its function to the most mundane possible explanation. It was a multi-purpose instrument. It was an astronomical observatory. It was a geodetic marker, locking its position to the very dimensions of the Earth. It was, perhaps, something more, a machine whose purpose we can no longer even guess at. The climax of our understanding is the death of the primitive ancient builder. We must replace the image of a whip-wielding overseer with that of a scientist priest, a master surveyor, and a logistical genius coordinating a national project of unparalleled complexity. The workforce was not a slave army, but a highly organized, well-fed, and skilled rotational labor force, a fact now supported by the discovery of the workers' village at Giza. They were citizens participating in a sacred national project. The true shock is the implication for our timeline of human history. The orthodox view presents a steady linear progression of knowledge from primitive beginnings to our modern enlightened age. The Great Pyramid stands in violent opposition to this narrative. It suggests a civilization that reached a scientific and engineering peak, only for that knowledge to be lost, plunging the world into a long decline before the slow climb back began. It is evidence of a lost chapter, a forgotten golden age of technical prowess that predates the Greeks, the Romans, and all that we consider the foundation of Western science. The implications of this re-evaluation are not merely academic. They strike at the very heart of our modern identity and our perception of progress. The Great Pyramid serves as a permanent 6 million ton rebuke to our technological arrogance. We live in an age of incredible achievement, where we can sequence the human genome and send probes to the outer solar system. Yet, we are confronted by an artifact from 4,500 years ago that we struggle to fully explain, let alone replicate. A 2012 study by the construction firm D.E. Shaw, when asked to estimate the cost of building the Great Pyramid today, put the figure in the billions of dollars and noted the immense logistical challenges in quarrying and transporting such massive stones. Even with modern equipment, this forces a deep and unsettling humility. The universal theme is that knowledge is not a one-way street. History is not a simple line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a complex, cyclical process where incredible heights of knowledge can be reached and then catastrophically lost. We are the inheritors of a fragmented history, and the pyramid is a reminder of how much we may have forgotten. Its existence suggests that human ingenuity is not a modern invention, but a timeless force that can manifest in ways we can no longer comprehend. The modern relevance is a crucial lesson in intellectual curiosity. When we are faced with an anomaly that contradicts our worldview, the temptation is to explain it away, to force it into our existing boxes. The story of the pyramid teaches us to do the opposite, to cherish the anomaly, to study the impossibility, because that is where true discovery lies. It reminds us that the most profound secrets are often hidden in plain sight, and that the greatest obstacle to understanding our past is the certainty that we already know it. The pyramid challenges us to remain open to the possibility that our ancestors were not our intellectual children, but in some ways our equals, or even our superiors. So we return to the desert, standing before this silent mountain of stone. It no longer looks like a simple tomb. It now appears as a question mark, an equation waiting to be solved. The seemingly impossible precision is no longer a historical curiosity. It is the signature of a forgotten mastery. The whispers of lost science are no longer the domain of fantasy, but are echoed in every perfectly aligned corridor and every impossibly flat surface. The Great Pyramid is not a relic of the past. It is a timeless artifact that interrogates the present. It forces us to confront the fragility of knowledge and the arrogance of our own time. It stands as a testament to the idea that the human mind in any era is capable of achieving the sublime, of reaching for the stars, and in this case, of bringing the stars down to earth. The next time you look at a photograph of this monument or any great work of antiquity, do not see it as a solved puzzle from a simpler time. See it as a challenge, and ask yourself a final provocative question. What other impossibilities are hiding in our history, patiently waiting for us to be humble enough to see them?